Yo, hello everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Pixelists, where we talk about games, movies, shows, nerdy things we enjoy. Hope everyone's doing well today, especially my co-host Blake there, and I'm Will. How are you doing today, my friend?
Hi. I'm doing good. It is Friday. It's one of those weeks where I'm just like, dude, I am so tired. Like the week was just long, and I'm assuming it was long for you because you're getting over some COVID.
Yeah,
man.
it has
You
been a
feeling
long
okay?
week. It's kind of like a mild flu or a really bad cold. I think I'm on the tail end of it, so I've been better, but I can't complain too bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, even though it was a long week, it was definitely one of those feelings yesterday where I was like, it was like around midday, and I was like, ooh, it's Critical Role tonight.
Yeah.
Which is a nice, there's some weeks where it's like Monday and you're like, oh, I gotta wait 3 days, and then there's other days where you're like, pleasant surprise, we're here. It's Thursday, my dudes.
We've already made it.
Yeah. So I'm excited to talk a little critical role tonight. And I say tonight because we're recording this on Friday night. And those of you watching, excited to have you join us as we talk about the show and give some of our favorite theories and thoughts about it. So anything else you want to say, just part of our intro before we dive in?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah.
I do know in advance that I'm going to be talking about a theory that I really like. Which, by the way, for you guys watching, we're going to do, it's probably going to be here in the next couple of episodes. We're going to do something like this, or when it feels like we're at like a really nice, like end of an arc. We're going to do a video on our favorite theories. You guys have already been commenting and saying some really just insane theories. And one of them I'm going to mention tonight, and I know you've seen it too. We haven't talked about it, but I want to talk about it tonight. But if you have a theory that you've already mentioned that you feel like is a really great theory and you feel like there's a good chance it might actually happen, go ahead and reshare it in the comments below. And we're going to do a video on our favorite theories. We're going to shamelessly steal them from you and say that we came up with, no, just kidding. No, we'll give you credit, all that stuff. But we'd just love to know y'all's favorite theories, because I think it'd be fun to do a video on like, hey, here's some of the theories that people are ruminating on.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
Not to that specifically, but you did trigger a couple things I did want to mention really quick.
Okay.
So yeah, please hit us with your theories. And then something else we've been tossing around was, obviously we do a recap of every episode, but we were also thinking about doing like a broader recap, like, because as we get 50, 100 episodes deep of this campaign, I'm sure some people would rather have like, okay, what happened in episodes 1 to 25 type of thing. So we've been talking about that, and what I'm getting at is, what do you guys think would be a good like amount to do that? Should we do it every 10 episodes, every 25, every 50? If anybody has any insight on that, would love to hear your thoughts. And then
I'm glad you said that, by the way, just because I've seen a couple of comments from people who've been like, hey, thanks for doing the video. I've started to kind of fall off a little bit. I've missed an episode here or there. Totally understandable. It is a lot of content on a weekly basis. So yeah, definitely let Will and I know kind of what you guys envision for like a larger big picture recap for people who want to get caught up. What was your second thing you wanted to mention?
Oh, and then the only other thing, which I don't think we talked about this last episode, but maybe we did. I'm kind of out of it. But The Legend of Vox Machina comes out this month, and we're obviously going to talk about that when it happens. But we're trying to figure out how we want to do that. I think they released that they're going to do it in 3 episode batches, so it might make the most sense to like do an episode of the Pixelists for episodes 1 through 3, or I don't know if some people would be like, no, like do it each episode individually, or I don't know. We haven't even talked about this, so I didn't know what even your thoughts were on how we should do that, but
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no clue. We'll
so
have to
let
talk
us
about
know
it
in the comments if anyone has
any
thoughts on that. But
Okay.
yeah, that's all I got.
All right. So I think I'm taking the first half of the recap, right?
Yeah,
Is that what
yeah.
we said? All of a sudden I had this moment of panic with you being like, no, dude, you're taking the second half.
I brought the
Supposed to bring the
sandwiches. You got the
tickets. Yeah.
tickets.
Tickets for the sandwiches kind of moment. Yeah, so if you're just plugging into this video, we'd like to do a recap of every episode. It's about 20-25 minutes long. And we'd like to take that, cut it out as its own video for people who are just trying to know what happened in this episode. So if you're watching that video right now, down in the episode description, we have the whole breakdown of our thoughts, favorite theories, all that stuff. Again, it's down in the description of the episode below. But having said that, let's talk about what happened in episode 10 of campaign 3 of Critical Role. Now, if you remember, what happened last week was Chetney found himself in Vali Dirtrana, sort of this business commissioner, in that person's office, and overheard a conversation with Vali and a person by the name of Ira down some dark staircase that was behind a bookshelf. Volley came up and was looking for Chetney, who was invisible, and Chetney jumped out of a window to escape. And that's where the episode picks up. So the episode picks up with Chetney, and just to quote Travis, doing his, gnome run. And Volley looks out the window, and despite the invisibility, is able to, I guess because of the rain, somewhat spot Chetney, and jumps out the window and makes his chase after Chetney. The party away actually sees this happening, and everybody immediately is like, what do we do? What do we do? We got to help Chetney. They have all sorts of ideas, but they also don't want to just, one, they don't want to kill Volley, and two, they also don't want to implicate the entire group by helping Chetney. So what they eventually decide to do is Imogen actually approaches Volley, who, by the way, is trying to swipe at Chetney, who's dodging these blade swipes, and cast calm emotions on him to try to calm him down, and basically be like a person who's like out in the courtyard being like, oh, hey, Volley, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Volley fails the DC on this, and so calm emotions works. And Imogen's like, hey, like, we were coming to see you. Like, we left a note. Like, did you get it? And he's like, what? No, like, I'm very busy. Like, what's going on? And Chetney then takes that moment to basically be like, I'm a spirit. Let me be free. I was killed in your office years ago. Basically saying like, hey, I'm just a ghost that's in your office. And then Chetney like books it while invisible. And Imogen plays off this and is like, what was that? Like, oh my gosh. And basically tricks Volley into believing that, hey, like, is this place haunted? Like, did you know this place was haunted? And Volley's like, no, it's not haunted, but wait, is it haunted? Basically ends up what happening is calms him down enough where he's just like, whatever, this was nuts. I need to talk to some people and like figure out what the heck just happened tonight. So he makes his way away. The situation is defused, and the party meets back up with Chetney, who Chetney basically reveals all the things that he read in the journal about the Nightmare King, and also basically just informs him about Ira and says, hey, I think maybe Gurge might be down there. I think they might have Gurge. So the party's like, well, this is too hot a scene for us to like come back and break in. But a couple of great points are made of, if Ira or Volley are now aware that someone is aware of their operation, that they might move Gurge or reset up shop elsewhere. Sorry, I'm stifling a sneeze like mid description here.
Let it out if you need to.
So they're like, we just got to go tonight. Like, we got to go tonight. But Imogen and Laudna and Fern are like, oh, well, we can't go tonight. We have our date with Pretty. And they're like, okay, well, fine. So here's what they decide to do. The three of them will go on their date with Pretty. Meanwhile, Dorian, Chetney, and Orem will sort of case the place and see like what the, if there's any kind of like investigation going on, or like more wardens or anything like that, kind of get an idea of the best route to enter. And then Ashton's like, hey, if we're all splitting up, this would be a good time to go follow up with that thing I said I needed to take care of by myself with basically JH. Like, now would be a good time to go do that.
Mm.
So they all split up. Orem, Chetney, and Dorian, they do end up sticking around the courtyard area, and they notice like some wardens who are inspecting the area. They actually notice a warden who seems to be sort of like a more elite warden or like a head warden, who it's like they're collecting evidence in the office. And meanwhile, they had earlier said, hey, whenever we want to meet back up at the Spire by Fire, we'll just use our sending stone. And Dorian had actually mentioned, like, oh, about that. I gave it to my brother. And a couple of the party members are like, ah, good one.
Oh.
And he's like, no, but really. And Ashton's like, I'm not just mad. Or he says, like, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. But he's like, and I'm also mad or something like that. But like while they're casing the joint, Orm's like, hey, man, like, I get it. It's your brother. Like, don't sweat it. It's no big deal. And then also, whenever they're done casing the place, Chetney's actually been hanging back at the gondola. And in talking with Chetney, Dorian basically says, like, hey, like, we're glad you're okay. Like, we wouldn't want something to happen to you. And he's like, well, why do you care? And he's like, well, because you're one of us now. Like, you're one of our friends. And this is a really important moment because it's like from this moment on that now Chetney, who's been really obstinate towards Dorian, he has like a tear in his eye. And then actually later, when they're talking later, he's like, you know, thanks, friend, and like puts his hand like on Dorian's shoulder,
Yeah.
or maybe vice versa. I can't remember, but it's kind of a cool little bro moment that happens between the two of them. Over at the date with Pretty, they arrive at the Soot and Swill, and Pretty's waiting for the three of them to show up. They come in, and Pretty immediately is like, see, and apparently had made bets with everyone at the tavern that they weren't really going to show up. So everyone, like, you know, I guess showers him with money. And oh, I forgot to mention that F.C.G. also, he's been like, yeah, I don't know what a date is like. So he had offered to come and sort of chaperone, and they're like, yeah, come on. So he's there as well. The three ladies sit down with Pretty. He gives each of them a present, and it's like different vegetables that Pretty has like taken out of the kitchen and sort of like carved, or, you know, did a little art spin on it to make it kind of a cool thing. Like one of them's two pumpkins stacked together. One of them is a cauliflower that's been like cut into like a spiral, almost like a flower. And then one's an artichoke that's like just a beautiful fresh artichoke.
Delicious.
And yeah, so and then Lada, by the way, is like, oh, I didn't even realize we should give you a gift. And has a tankard basically full of trash and like chicken bones and like maggots. And she's like, I hope this is okay. But so they basically have their date. And the whole time it's, you know, they're drinking together, they're talking, and they eventually make their way over to the what's the name of the
Dreamscape Theater.
The Dreamscape Theater, right? Because they have their lifetime passes,
Yeah.
which I won't spoil what happens after that. But they eventually do make their way over to there. And then Ashton makes his way to the Lucent Spire, the one spire we haven't seen yet, but we know is like where the nobles reside, and makes his way up to this rainy house and basically knocks on a door, and a person answers it, an older, I think it was an elf, who Ashton basically says, or knocks and says, hey, nobody's here. And if you remember the group that he ran with before, in his backstory, they were called the Nobodies.
Yeah.
And he's welcomed in. So that's the first half of the show.
Yeah. And just picking right up there. If I could find my spot. Oh yeah, okay. So and as Ashton's walking in, there are these two like sentry golems that are kind of like tracking his every movement. And Gianna Hexam, who we find this is her house, the Hexam Manor, greets him and basically, you know, starts eating cheese like a, you know, pompous person would.
Yeah.
And
cliche noble for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. And she's basically like, you know, I have an idea, something that may even be able to erase your debt if things go well. And she basically Ashton's like, okay, tell me more. And she basically reveals that she has entered into this like wager basically with a colleague of hers, Avon Hydroga, who was making fun of her because apparently recently she was robbed, like somebody broke into her house or something. We don't have the full context there, but she says this Avon Hydroga person was, taunting her for that, saying like no one could ever get through my defenses, and so thus this wager kind of came up between them, um, which is basically they're gonna each try to steal something from the other, and like whoever wins, gets a prize. Um,
It's a rat
so
race of sorts.
yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah.
Gianna's like, I know you're running with a new crew. Do you think your crew would be up for this type of job? Or do I need to like hire some outside people to do this? And Ashton says, you know what? We're kind of doing some things right now, but I think we could handle this. And he's like, I'm surprised though, because I thought you were calling me to this meeting because of your what's it called? Your carriage or whatever it is that was robbed
Yeah.
with the initials JH on it, which we now know for certain that this is the same JH. And she's like, how'd you know about that? And he's like, I'm close to it. I have, I don't reveal my sources, but I do want you to know that the person you're after for that is not who you should be going after. And referring to Dorian's brother, who has this
Right.
$20,000 bounty on his head. And but she's like, well, do you have any proof of this? And he's like, not yet. And so really not much else to go on there, at least at this juncture, but he does let her know that, hey, for what it's worth, you're going after the wrong person there. And she's like, yeah, well, I have more experienced people handling that. What I want you for is this wager thing. And she's like, if you guys accept, you'll have to travel to the Heartmoor, and that is where all the details of this wager will be given. That's where you'll be told like what you're trying to steal and yada yada yada. And there's a rival troop, if you will, that will be, I guess, attempting to steal something from Gianna. And we're told that Mistress Isha Sabonis, I think is the name, is the one sponsoring the rival troop. And she's like, if you guys do this, you'll be paid, of course, except for the party will be paid, of course, but you,
Right.
Ashton, will not be paid, but his debt will more than likely be cleared.
Yeah.
Um, so he's like, okay, I'll bring this information to my friends. And he's like, can I tell them about you? And she's like, yeah, this is above the board. Like, feel free to tell them about me. And he's like, okay, great. But before he leaves, he asks if she knows anything about the Nightmare King. And unfortunately, she is not familiar with that name. Um, but then Ashton does fill her in on their recent goings on. So he fills her in about the mimic at the theater and also their encounter with Vali. And she's like, whoa, whoa, y'all are messing with Vali. Like, he's very well connected. Like, you need to,
Yeah. Be
watch
careful.
what you're doing. And
Yeah.
and Ashton says, yeah, he's into some super dark shit. And she's like, oh, what? And he's like, well, we don't know yet, but I'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so anyway, Ashton then takes his leave, and we then basically cut to the end of the date with Pretty and the girls, and F.C.G. They're leaving the Dreamscape Theater, and Pretty is actually giving like a very detailed and thoughtful review of the show. Like he's much more intelligent than I think a lot of us gave him credit for.
Right.
And he after he does that, he basically stops and I think he even kneels down to like get on their level, and he's like, ladies, tonight was such an unexpected pleasure, but we're just different people, and it's like it's not
Right.
you, it's me kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um so he tells them it's not going to work out romantically, but he still wants to be friends, and he cares for them deeply. He's invested in their happiness, and he's like, when you do find that special someone, he's like, come to the restaurant. I'd love to cook you guys a meal. Um, and then he takes his leave. Uh,
I think he
then,
says he's gonna go work on his novel
oh
or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, I think he does.
Yeah.
And and then F.C.G. and the girls talk a little bit about it, and F.C.G.'s basically like, it was kind of boring, but I
Yeah.
learned I learned a
This
little
date
bit.
sucked.
Yeah. And so then basically that whole group heads back to the Spire by Fire, which is where everyone said they were going to meet up after they, do their own things. Um, which during this time, Dorian, Chetney, and Orem, like Blake mentioned, had kind of been scouting Vali's office to see, what the security level was, and just see what if more trying to get more information so they can make a solid plan. And basically, the only thing they learn is that in the morning he's going to move all of his stuff and just basically not use that office anymore.
Right. I forgot to
Um,
mention that. Yeah.
so then the three of them also head back to the Spire by Fire, and so now everyone's back, and they're basically all filling each other in on their own events of the night. And Ashton lets everybody know about this job offer they have of this wager. And the party is interested, especially considering the connection with Dorian's brother and Gianna. They're like, maybe if we do this job, we can kind of ingratiate ourselves with her and maybe get some heat off of Cyrus. But then the party asks, like, Ashton, what's your history with Gianna? And he basically tells them about his old crew, the Nobodies, were on this mission to basically rob her, and they got caught. And well, they didn't get caught actually, but things went to shit. Ashton got really hurt, and everyone else skipped town. But because Ashton was hurt, he was still in town. Gianna found out it was him, and basically, instead of turning him into the authorities, was like, "Hey, how about you just work off this debt for me?"
Right.
And that's kind of how their relationship started. And he also reveals that that is also how he got that big injury that starts on his head and kind of goes down his arm, is when he was robbing Gianna in her house. He was up on a high floor, and he says that the only thing he remembers is like a blast of magic energy hitting him, and then he like crashes through a window and fell. And he says he just woke up in Milo's off or not office, but Milo's
Yeah.
place,
Yeah. Like lab or
uh,
whatever.
who had just used whatever they could to fix him, because Milo's not a healer, doesn't have healing magic, but they just use their tinkering skills, and that's why he's got like the glass and the gold that are kind of patching him up. Um, and the party asks, like, are you mad at your old crew for leaving you like that? And Ashton just says, no, I understand. Like, I would have done the same thing. If I see him again, might be a couple punches thrown, but then that'll be the end of it. And they're like, oh, okay. Um, so then they're like, so this wager that Gianna wants to do, like, hire us for, like, when is that? And he's like, well, it's not tonight, so we don't need to worry about that tonight. Like, let's focus on this Gurge Chetney thing. So they're like, okay, yeah, what are we gonna do about that? So they ultimately decide, since everything's going to be moving in the morning, tonight is their best chance. And so they head back toward the moon tower to see if they can sneak back in there and go check out that hidden room behind the bookcase that Chetney found. So they make their way there, and there's a few guards kind of roaming around the outside of this courtyard. And one of them takes notice of this big group, and he walks over and is like, yeah, what are you guys doing here? You guys, it's late, you guys need to go home. And they play it off by being like, oh, we heard there were like these ghost attacks earlier, like
Yeah.
some
Like
cursed
tourist or
spirits were
something.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they ask him, have you ever like heard anything or seen anything like that? And he says, you know what? A lot of nights I'm out here hearing voices. And he said that there was like a massacre or something around these parts like 35 years ago, and thinks that, like, maybe some of those
Yeah.
spirits were still lingering. And he's like, okay, but you guys need to go home. So he kind of like turns around and is continuing his patrol. And Laudna decides to cast Silent Image of like this ghost, like kind of peering out of a wall, like grabbing for him. And at the same time, she casts Message into his brain and just says, like, let me free. And the guard actually rolls a natural one on this to discern if it's an illusion. So he freaks out, like drops his spear and just books it out of there.
I think Matt said he like leaves the tower entirely. Like
Yeah.
the spire and like he leaves the district, like
Yeah,
just
he's just
leaves
leaving
completely.
Drusar.
Yeah. He leaves Marquette. He's out of there.
So now that they've got like the coast, at least the immediate coast is clear, they all jump over this wall and actually get inside of the courtyard where the moon tower is. And Orum's kind of taking point, trying to make sure that nobody gets seen. And it is still raining, and it's pitch black night as well, obviously. And they do notice they can't like see guards, but they can see their magical torches that they are holding, so they can kind of see these lights like bobbing around different places. And basically they're just darting like from hedge to hedge trying to stay hidden. And this actually reminded me of an Ocarina of Time where you're like young Link trying to break into the castle to see Zelda.
Yeah, yeah.
I digress.
We won't tell
Anyway,
you what happens there, by the way. I'm just kidding.
uh,
Spoiler alert.
so as they're diving between the hedges, one of the guards actually comes up close to them. It doesn't see them yet. So Lana decides to basically do the same thing. She casts another illusion, this time of this like creepy little flower girl in all white, who
I
has
think of
like,
the girl from The Ring is basically what
yeah,
I envisioned.
yeah, exactly that. I feel like was what she was going for. And like she has like voids for eyes, and like the bottom half of her jaw was just like gone and
Yeah,
just like,
right.
and so she has that creature kind of reach out toward this guard, and he just passes out, passes out immediately from fear. Um, so now that they have this coast clear as well, they make their way all the way to the moon tower, sneak back up in through the broken window that Chetney jumped out of, and all safely get into the office. Then Chetney disarms a trap and quickly is able to throw the switch that opens the bookcase, and he immediately goes in there and sees what he can see. Or actually, he's just seeing what he can hear and what he can notice from like the top of the top of the staircase. And he's told that he hears like this kind of gleeful humming, but also this like arcing of energy, like pulsating kind of sporadically.
Right.
And so he's curious, and he kind of takes a few more steps down just to see like the first things he can see. And he comes to this chamber that we're told kind of looks like a set of holding cells, and there's a big table in the center with a lot of like alchemical reagents and stuff on it, some boxes scattered about, and also this like weird contraption that's about 10 feet tall and has got lots of like metal rods and is glowing blue. And also there is a tall humanoid figure that's like 7 or 8 feet tall that is very thin and lithe and is wearing this long black coat with the many tails, and they have like really elongated limbs, and he's like he just looks like wrong how he's
Yeah.
situated. And Chetney can see that this person is the one humming and kind of going back and forth between these things, and he's also holding, I think, some blue gem.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
and Chetney then also hears another voice, which he recognizes to be Gurge. And Gurge is asking what this creepy figure, he's like, "What the hell do you want with us, man?" And this figure says that, your gift needs to be shared with the world. But I have more pressing matters to attend to right now. And they like kind of turn around and are walking back between this contraption and other things in the room. So Chetney kind of fills in Imogen with what he's seeing telepathically. And everyone's like, okay, what the hell? And so Chetney then goes further down since the figure has turned around and kind of walked away from him just to see even more what he can see when he goes into the room. And when he does this, he can now see Gurge, and he looks very rough. And, this information is getting relayed. And so the rest of the party's like, okay, like we're coming down too. And so as everyone starts to come down, the figure turns around and is like, oh, I wasn't expecting guests, but tonight's just going to get more interesting. And since he turned around, we can see that he has no eyebrows and eyes with no irises, no nose, and a grin that Matt describes as like a jack o' lantern that stretches all the way to his ears. And that's where the session ends.
No big deal, right? Yeah, great job. Yeah, that's what happened in episode 10 of Campaign 3. And if you made it this far, you want to hear our reactions and you're watching just the recap video, again, click the link below and we'll dive right in. So, having said that, my friend, we were back after a long wait. We already came back last week.
Yeah.
We're still back after a week, a long week to another great episode. What was your general reaction to the episode?
I really liked it. I really enjoyed this episode. Just because it was all the things that I love. We got a lot of uh, interesting information too. We found out a lot about Ashton that I'd been wondering about, and really finally getting somewhere with this Gurge situation as well. And obviously, who didn't love the whole Pretty saga and the date. And I just loved Pretty's characterization that I personally didn't see coming. Um, with him being, like pretty well spoken and thoughtful, if might be a better choice of words there. Um, but I really liked it. What about you?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I mean, I feel like an episode could be terrible, and I'd be like, yeah, it was really good. Because I'm a shameless Critical Role fanboy. But I would definitely, out of the 10 episodes so far, I would probably put this one towards the lower end because of where it's fallen, in the sense of there was a lot of momentum built in the last episode with Chetney escaping,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like we were like moving towards something, and it felt like this episode brought that energy back down again. Now we ended, and I want to talk about this. We ended with it right back up there, so I'm really excited for next episode. But yeah, love the episode. Just in general, I was kind of like I'd seen some comments from people being like, "Yeah, I'm kind of losing interest, or I haven't really stayed on top of it," and like this would be the episode that I could understand someone saying that,
Mm-hmm.
only because it great RP, great conversation, but a lot of like just kind of filling air, I guess, like waiting for the next important story stroke, I guess. So again, love the episode, great episode, but definitely not my favorite episode.
Yeah,
So
that's totally fair. I actually had a feeling that a lot of people would feel that way, especially because like we're left on this last week cliffhanger of which it wasn't like directly involving Gurge because Chetney was just trying to escape, um, and then that's basically where we are at the end of this week's episode. So I could see some people like having a problem with maybe even calling this episode filler, if you will. Um, but I don't like view Critical Role in the same way as I would like a TV show. Um, so to me, it's not, to me I think of it as like it's not as if like, oh man, they totally baited us and now we're gonna have to wait a whole nother week to get to this thing we've been wanting to go to. To me, it's like everything we got, like I was excited about. I'm word vomiting here, but
yeah, it's like I think isolated, it's a good episode. I think like the whole story with like the pretty date thing, I really enjoyed it.
mhm.
I think it's just where for me, it's just where it falls
Yeah, yeah,
in the sense of there was so much that happened and transpired in the first like 5 episodes, and so we knew there'd be a little bit of a slow burn and build up to like the next thing. And so the Dreamscape Theater, um, searching for Gurge, like all of that was a new direction that was interesting. But I think because of where we are now, I could see people just getting impatient of
mhm.
like, which is why I say I think next week's going to be really awesome, because it's you have
Yeah.
this
I mean,
character who seems to be related to the Nightmare King, is clearly holding Gurge, right? So we can correctly probably assume that this person works for the Nightmare King, since the journal said bring to the Nightmare King,
right.
and is also holding a blue crystal, which the other blue material that we've seen has been Broomstone. And so might even be someone who's connected. We might be connecting some story points in a meaningful way next episode.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think, yeah. I'm about to just repeat everything you and I both said, but yes, agreed, agreed. Um,
Do you have the sense that I was trying to like process this like from like my like DM eyes, which you have more experience than I do, but I almost got the sense I'm probably reading into it, but I almost got the sense that the party is a little out of their element. It almost felt like which Matt didn't overtly say like, no, you guys shouldn't do this tonight. Like you shouldn't, and nothing like that.
mhm.
But the party seemed really set on going back there despite, and I can't think of any specifics, but it felt like there were a handful of things that didn't pan out in terms of like roles or ideas that they were like, okay, that's not going to work. And so it almost felt like they were really like stuck to this idea. But then the other thing that I was thinking of too is in approaching Ira, it there were some comments from Matt on hey, like what's everyone doing to prepare yourself? Like,
Mhm.
hey, like anything else, like you're not going to have You're not going to want to spend a round to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, Fern, are you going to summon Mr. Now or use it later? Like these kinds of things, I don't know if I'm reading into it, but sort of communicated to me that, hey, you're about to face a really challenging foe, and maybe even Matt wasn't expecting this to happen so quickly. Because also don't forget either the party, they've used a lot of spell slots, they've used a lot of their resources.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I'm kind of just word vomiting here. I don't know. What's your
No,
reaction?
no, yeah, I like that. I like everything you just said, and I think that is Matt kind of. Matt's never going to be the type of DM that says, "Y'all, you guys can't do this. Like that's dumb. Like no, like don't do that." And
Right.
so I think those are his ways of kind of like giving them subtle warnings, or like, hey, like, as opposed to being like, this encounter is going to be really hard, you guys. Instead, he says, hey, what do you guys want to cast anything? Like, do you want to get Mister out? I think that's just his DM style of like kind of letting them know that they might be getting into something that's a little bit rough. Which I was thinking the same thing, like especially when Chetney originally went by himself to go check things out. I was like, oh god. I mean, I know they're all in the next room, but I was like, what is Travis doing? And I kind of agree with you in the sense that like it seems like they had a lot of reasons not to do this tonight, but it was 100% Travis that was pushing for it. Anytime there was like any waffling on that fact, he was like, no, like I'm gonna stay. And it's like earlier in the episode, he's like, no, I'm gonna stay here, even if it's by myself, to see what happens here. And then like when they're in the Spire by Fire talking about plans, he's like, well, we're just gonna go in the office, press the button, go in the bookcase. So I think he was the one that kind of really kept that train pushing forward. And
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say this is kind of a segue, not really, but one thing that we've been wondering about is like what's really going on with his story.
Right.
It seems like there's more than just he needs a job recommendation from this guy, right? And so a few of our commenters pointed out, and I've seen this theory now, is that perhaps Chetney is a werewolf or were something and needs Gurge's help or assistance in that with some way. So to me, maybe that's why this has been so pressing, and maybe that's why he was like, "We got to do this tonight," is because Chetney, whatever the thing may be, it like needs Gurge for some reason.
Yeah, I love this theory. This is what I was mentioning earlier on. Like, I'm really excited to talk about this.
Oh, okay, nice.
Let me just read out a couple of these comments on our last video, because a few different people actually all simultaneously mentioned this
Mm-hmm.
theory. Aaron Ginsberg basically said, which Aaron, thanks for commenting, said, Chetney's rationale for meeting up with Gurge makes no sense, as you and the cast have pointed out. Surely someone in Wildmount could have used a carpenter, and he shouldn't need to move continents just to find work. It's plausible that there wouldn't be another werewolf to teach him how to control his powers in Wildmount. Paul Savas said perhaps they're both lycanthropes, and that's why Gurge and Chetney are trying to meet. And then there was, here we go. Ryan Weaver mentions, I like the theory that Chetney is a werewolf, explaining his 17 strength. Hadn't looked at
Mm.
his stats, so that was a great
Yeah, I
call out.
haven't really looked at that either.
Remember, if you accept the curse, you don't suffer the uncontrollable full moon rampages. And D&D is trying to shy away from giving any group a particular alignment as a whole. So 3 comments that as soon as I read those, I was like, man, that's a really interesting insight, especially since the party has even picked up too, like, hey, there's something you're leaving out here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you could be totally right. I really like that.
Yeah, so uh, circling it back around to I think where we started with this was one, I think Chetney was the reason they were so focused on doing this tonight. But two, I just think that is Matt's like DMing style to kind of warn them in those ways that you mentioned. But I definitely am kind of worried about this encounter. Because Ira, which I'm trying not to go off on too many tangents here, but you said something that made a connection for me a second ago. I never even considered that Ira was the Nightmare King, but I guess he that's what you were saying, right? That he might be.
No, I
Oh,
was thinking it probably knows the Nightmare King or works for the Nightmare King.
oh, okay.
I think it'd be too soon for this to be the Nightmare King, I think.
Well, just the so I thought you were the one that said this, but I guess I just misunderstood, but since that note did say like the Nightmare King wants Gurge, and now Ira is the one like experimenting on Gurge, I was like, well, maybe he is the Nightmare King. Not that that is like a revelation or a moment or
Yeah, yeah.
anything, but I just previously thought they were two entities. Now I'm like, maybe they're the same. But they did mention like their patron, which
Yeah.
maybe that's the Nightmare King.
Yeah, and it seems like Gurge is like a side mission for Ira in the sense of like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe him and his underlings discovered Gurge. We know that Gurge has a bit of a reputation. I'm just gonna call it the lower city, or like the lower caste. And so, maybe they picked him up, said, yeah, that'd be really interesting for future stuff, but uh, Ira mentions, hey, that's going to have to wait for now. I have other things I'm working on. And that's also around the time where Ira holds up the blue crystal, which is it safe to assume this is Broomstone?
That's my best guess, but I don't know. I mean, that would kind of connect some dots, but I'm
It's
not
another
sure.
crystal called Doomstone, also blue. Yeah, I mean, it seems like this, and I don't remember. I mean, he's been the whole scene. He's arcing on something. He's tinkering with something.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is a refined version of Broomstone. Um, I'm not sure,
I
but
mean, clearly he's doing some weird experimenting down there. Like we're told that there's alchemical supplies and there's that huge ass contraption thing that we don't know what it does. And he has a werewolf as one of his prisoners, which it seems like there's multiple prison cells down
right.
there. Now if any of them have anyone else in it, we don't know, but to me he's doing some crazy ass experiments and like maybe trying to combine a werewolf with something else, or he says he wants to give Gurge's gift to the world, which to me clearly meaning your werewolfness. So I don't, maybe he's trying to like extract that and see
Your
if he can like
shagginess.
yeah, maybe he's like seeing if he
Your beard
can
is good.
weaponize it or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, clearly he's up to some weird stuff, which this is kind of something we touched on last week, is like where to Ira's machinations end and this grander conspiracy with the patron and with whatever Vali's doing and with the broomstone and Duggar, like if this is, where that begins. Um so I don't know. He talked about like, my you couldn't even comprehend the beauty of my plans, or he had something, to that extent
Yeah.
last week. So I just rambling here. I have no answers, but I'm just curious as to like what all fits into what here. Like,
Yeah. What is Ira, by the way? Like the description, which Matt, I mean, Matt Mercer is just the king of descriptions, right?
nightmare fuel.
Yeah, I mean, I love the description of Ira, so slender and lithe and like Slender Man-esque is kind of the
Mm-hmm.
image I
Yeah.
got. But then I love the comment where he said he sits on a stool that's a bit too low and sort of like sits with like his knees like up.
Yeah.
And then like the like mutilated face, no nose, no
Mm-hmm.
eyebrows, like voids for pupils, no lips, a mouth that's like carved up like a jack-o'-lantern up to his ears.
Mm.
What is this? What monster is this? What race is this? Like yellow skin. I don't know enough about D&D to be like my
Yeah.
encyclopedia going off being like,
I
oh,
don't
that's
either.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I have no idea. And it might be like a homebrew creation, may not even be something from the books. Which I imagine there probably is at least something, if not completely homebrew, then something he took and kind of made his own. Matt does that a lot, but yeah, I don't know. Did you ever play Little Nightmares?
No, I don't think so.
That kind of, for anyone that did, that's what this description kind of reminded me of. Is if you remember the guy that had like the really long arms in Little Nightmares, very creepy. And then of course when he said no nose, Voldemort, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, super creepy. Also very curious as to what it is. I mean, my best guess is some sort of like mutated, experimented, based on, it looks like he is doing experiments. Maybe he started by doing them to himself, or maybe he's still doing them to himself. But an elf, since he mentioned that like he has really long elf-like ears, but they're like way longer than any elf he'd seen.
Yeah.
So maybe at one point he was an elf, and just after whatever crazy
Mm.
stuff he's gotten into. He's now this
Yeah, and
big thing.
I've seen a couple of Reddit comments on like fan theories. One of them, someone guessed was a GIF. If you're familiar
Mm-hmm.
with the GIF,
Mm-hmm.
my only familiarity is with the the alpha for Baldur's Gate 3, where one of the characters is a GIF. Definitely not grotesque like what we're seeing. Really, it's only the yellow skin and the ears that are similar matches. And then someone else shared a monster, basically called a boogeyman that has that jack-o'-lantern style mouth, but really nothing else lines up. So it could be, like you said, some kind of homebrew um, monster that he's cooked up, or it could be a mutated, mutilated form of something we've seen before.
Yeah, I
So
like that Gith theory. I hadn't thought about that, but that does kind of fit a few of the things we know. So that's interesting.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
What's he up to?
hopefully the party's going to be okay because I also saw
Yeah.
another Reddit comment where someone was like, "Oh, this is where Dorian leaves. He dies." And I was like, "Oh, geez. I hope that's not the case." But yeah, so the party clearly, I wish I had like everyone's character sheets up in front of me, like to see like spell slots and stuff like that. But the party's going in on near empty. I mean, Fern has one spell slot left. I think someone else mentioned they had one or just a couple of spell slots left.
Well, Laudna
So
used a couple just as distractions to get there, so she's at
right,
least fighting underhanded or not
right,
underhanded, shorthanded. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, and for all we know, like this is an encounter that is doable for them, and yeah, it might be difficult, but it's gonna be fine. Or it could be like we kind of alluded to, like maybe they're in over their heads here. In which case, I wonder what outs they might potentially have. I mean, I guess they could presumably just run and leave, jump through that window again, if nothing else, or if um like I guess what I'm getting at is I wonder if not like a combat where they kill this thing. What are the other ending scenarios here? Like, it's just even though we know nothing about this, it feels like it's too soon for it to die, in my opinion. Like,
yeah. You
uh,
think we might get a enough, and then like
yeah, or like it flees or something.
go ahead and hire me, Blizzard. I'll write your next big bad.
They could probably use you. Just stay
uh,
away from the corruption.
uh, well, so yeah, I think they're gonna break Gurge out. I mean, I think that's gonna be. I think what's really great
Ooh, that's
about the
true.
Critical Role D&D team is they're really great at not the like traditional. I'm just gonna cast Eldritch Blast every turn, but like
Mm-hmm.
being creative with not just one like not just combining their actions with other people, like building off what other people do, but also like being clever with the environment and just
Oh
thinking
yeah.
big picture, being tactical and strategic. So I think that Chetney or someone is going to try to break Gurge out mid combat, and that will be sort of like the saving grace for the combat. Where maybe that's the wrong analogy, but
No, that's
like
right.
the in case of emergency break glass type of
Yeah, yeah.
situation. So they're going to break him out and Matt will be playing Gurge, and now it's a lot more of a level playing field and a lot more doable. I agree with you. I don't quite see this character dying right off the bat. But maybe, who knows? So I
Yeah.
guess if he does die, then I would hate to go back to Lord Esteros and be like, all right, what's the next mission for us? Like we need to keep building somewhat towards a more narrower focus, I think. So
Yeah, which great point that I think you're 100% right that I didn't even think about is they will absolutely can recruit Gurge for this fight. And there may be other prisoners that, at least for the time being, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So they could
right.
maybe even have a few allies for this fight if it gets a little, if it is, deadly encounter or whatever. Um, but yeah, I agree with the other thing you said there. And I think even if they do kill him, I think there's obviously still a lot going on, even if like because there's this patron, there's whatever they've been setting up. Um,
They need to meet with the anger still. We know that's happening.
mm-hmm.
Presumably in the next couple episodes, it's probably going to happen, I would
Yeah,
guess. So
which um that is kind of a good segue. But was there anything else we wanted to talk about with Ira
No, no, I don't think so.
and anything? Okay, yeah, I don't think so either. We'll come back, I guess, if we remember. But speaking of the anger, another theory that somebody posted on our last video was that the anger could be um, our first guest appearance, and maybe that's why Matt has been so deliberate with the timing of when this meeting can actually happen. Which I love that idea, and I would be super stoked if that was the case. I think that would be a great way to kind of like subtly build up to this character we've been waiting to meet for forever, and then if like somebody walked in and sat down, that would just be awesome to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't. Did
I
you
don't know
did you
why.
happen to see that?
Yeah, yeah. This came from Eric Glimme, or just Glim.
Yeah, thank you, Glim.
Said, I'm wondering if the anger may be a guest. Matt is keeping tight control on when they meet him. He's still recovering, maybe in a week. He
Yeah,
may be delaying the anger until, this was an interesting detail, maybe delaying the anger joining until Robbie or Dorian leaves, which, I mean, that's the win of that is going to be, all sorts of tears because
yeah,
all I see nonstop is how much everyone loves Robbie
yeah.
for good reason. He's amazing.
Right.
I love Robbie too. So
Which, speaking of Robbie, speaking of Dorian, I don't think that, 'cause like you just said, I think that anger's coming soon. Be it next week or in just the next few episodes. I think that's probably a pretty safe bet. I don't think Robbie's necessarily leaving that soon. So I don't really think that that's necessarily the case where they would
yeah,
like.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be too quick. I think Robbie. I don't see Robbie dying. I think he's too
I mean, unless
loved.
he just happens to die.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's too loved a character though for it to be like an intentional death, as we saw
Yeah.
with Bertrand.
Hmm. I
Um,
agree.
and I also only see Robbie leaving. The neat and tidy storyline in my mind is him leaving one of two ways. Cyrus dies, maybe through Artanavo. Cyrus dies, and Dorian sort of begrudgingly is like, I have to go home and take on this mantle of responsibility.
Yeah.
Or two, it gets so hot in Dressar for Cyrus that Dorian's like, I need to get
Like,
my
get us
brother.
out of here.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna peel off and do my own thing. Which
Yeah.
opens the door for that second one's a bit neater for him to eventually return at a later date
Hmm.
also.
Yeah, I agree with both of those 100%. I think that's how it would be. Which he kind of hinted at that last night in last night's episode. I don't remember the exact context, but he was basically there. I think they were talking about, his brother and all that heat. And he was basically like, I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me or helping, my brother. And he was saying that like at that point I would just leave so that you guys don't get hurt. And everyone was like, no, like, basically being there for him, saying like, we want to
Right.
help you and everything. But to me, that was kind of like the first maybe seed of, his departure potentially,
Right.
for the reasons you just said.
Yeah. Which again, he's amazing. So it's just like the party we felt it when Travis was waiting to rejoin the table. I think there will be a void whenever Dorian leaves. Because he has a wholesomeness to him, his character. That's really, he calls it fibbing when they ask about the sending stone. He's like, I was thinking about fibbing. It's so wholesome
Oh,
and so genuine, right? And at the same time, um, he's just a great character. I mean, such a great character, and Robbie plays him so well and collaborates so well with everyone else. I do think people are gonna feel that when he's gone.
okay.
Hopefully,
Remind
no
me,
time soon.
remind me about fibbing in a second. I just don't want to forget.
Okay.
Um, But you make a great point about the void, which, there's been a lot of guests throughout the years on Critical Role that were incredible, like amazing. So I don't want to like but he's just been a little bit different in that he's been there from episode 1, and I think now he's been in more episodes than any previous guest. So but he is a guest, at least in all the forms they've kind of showed us so far. But you're right. He feels I just haven't. I don't know. I'm rambling here, but I haven't thought about it in this light before. Because I've accepted the fact that he's probably a guest, but I haven't really thought about the fact that like when he leaves, it's gonna feel like a main member of that party is gone, which
Yeah.
that's new because no other guest has kind of had that
Yeah.
like permanent role like that. So that is going to be weird. I wonder if they even like thought about that when they were making this decision. Like maybe I don't know if I would have had him be there from the jump if that was their plan. Like maybe come in episode 5 and then, I mean, but maybe he is permanent and we just,
Yeah, I mean, it
I mean,
could
who knows?
be. I mean, all you crazy CR fans out there, I'm talking to you. It could be that they were just being a bit tender with the whole subject and just didn't want to just bring someone in and ruffle feathers, especially people who were like, this is not the table that I've, grown up loving. Because people could be very particular.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe they brought him in under the guest title just to keep it a bit softer. And seeing the reception, they're like, hey, yeah, he's going to be permanent, which I hope that's the case. Um, randomly, this is such a Mephisto moment, but randomly I was thinking about when we were watching EXU and there was all this back and forth on the crown and was Dorian, whose alignment actually shifted because of the crown. And you sent me the comic of the guy who basically says, I have no fear. And then someone walks up with the shirt that says, the cast of EXU are the big bad evil guys of CR3, and the person's shirt, or it changes to one fear then. And we were like, I hope that doesn't happen. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Robbie also tweeted, again, this is like the deepest of dives. Robbie also tweeted about how do you play evil characters and was like, you just be a normal human being.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and I won't get too much into that. Point that I'm getting at is it'd be crazy to me if he had to leave for his brother, his kingdom, whatever, and eventually came back as an enemy or the big bad evil guy of the campaign. I mean, what would hit harder than him being the enemy in that final episode? All that he's been through with Orem, I mean, the party, I don't know. I'm just
Man,
throwing it out there to let that simmer.
what would even cause him to do that though? Like,
Who knows, man?
yeah,
Maybe
but
his
that
brother
that
dies and he wants to find an answer to bring him back. I don't know.
that would
Buffy the
be
Vampire
crazy.
style. I don't know.
That would be a gut punch. Uh,
Yeah, you heard it here. Me and Will agree that this is. No, I'm just kidding.
Dorian BBEG confirmed.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Anyway, I've
Um,
rambled enough about Dorian, but great character. Robbie Damon's amazing. I mean, seriously.
Agreed. I actually have some more on Dorian, but
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I do
so
too. And I like wheel in like a whiteboard. It's like a Pepe Sylvia moment. All right, hit me with it.
okay, I actually have even another thing besides the thing I asked you to remind me about. Speaking of EXU, this is small, but I wanted to point it out. Uh, I don't remember the exact context, but it was I think it was at the Spire by Fire. But Chetney was like, "Oh, what? You have some trauma from leaving someone behind or something?" to Dorian, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Ooh!" And like for those, and like maybe Travis wasn't referencing this, but I have to think he was. Some stuff from EXU that if you watched EXU, we know about.
All right,
Um,
hey, before you even say this, he's referencing Bertrand, right?
oh, is that what he's referencing?
I thought he's referencing like,
I guess that would
hey,
make sense.
you were supposed to like walk me to bed, but you didn't, and I died. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
assuming that's
That could
what he
also
was prodding and joking about was like, oh, you got some trauma there, like, oh yeah, he's dead. So,
that would also connect. So that also
all right,
that's
go
probably
ahead though,
and
hit
but
me
no, so
with
that
it.
makes more sense because I feel like
See, now you're gonna feel
Travis,
stupid saying it though. So I should have
yeah.
waited. I mean, what
So,
an idiot. All right,
but
what's
so
the you
yeah,
thought though?
but so I thought Travis was referencing the whole like heat of the relationship between Dorian and Fira Rai that he left her when they escaped that portal.
Oh
And like,
man,
he was wrestling
yeah,
with that basically throughout the whole of EXU. And so when he said, "Oh, what, you have trauma from leaving someone behind?" So that's what I thought he was
yeah, that
talking
was
about. And I was like, "Damn,
yeah.
that's like a deep cut, Travis."
Yeah, that was a major for those who didn't watch EXU. It was a major point of tension between two of the players, where one of the players was basically left to her own demise
Hmm.
because of because of Dorian doing what he thought was best for the party, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be That'd be interesting for sure.
So, but part of me was like, would Travis even know that? Like, I don't know. Did Travis like watch all of EXU and like have that ready to go? So I think the Bertrand thing probably makes more sense.
Yeah,
But
we'll go with Fear Rye.
yeah, I just thought that was
I'll
a
give you
cool
that.
connection.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
And then
anyway,
what's the fibbing
the
thing?
fibbing thing is that moment you brought up with where he and Orm were talking and being like, I thought about fibbing. This may be another thing I'm reading too much into, but I liked that because
I love how I gave such like a disclaimer on me Mephistoing and like you have your own and they all revolve. We must really like Dorian. So all right, sorry.
how could
I
you
didn't mean to
not?
interrupt.
No,
Yeah.
you're fine. Um, but to me, I read that as like, and we've talked about this a little bit too, like the depth of Orem and Dorian's relationship since they've had all of EXU, and then basically a year since then to now. So they're like two of the most connected people on our whole party. I like that they had that little moment where Dorian was like, I thought about lying, but I didn't. I told the truth, and I thought that kind of spoke to his character, also from stuff from EXU, where he kind of was conversing with the Spider Queen and kind of the whole Fear of Rai thing that we just talked about. But he kept a lot of stuff like to himself. So to me, I was like, this is a growth moment where he and Orm are like, see, like I could have lied, but I told the truth here, and it worked out. Like they weren't mad. So
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm possibly reading way too much into that, but I liked that as like a depth of character moment.
I like I just like their friendship. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
great. Especially again in EXU. Dorian and Orem had some tension there. Orem, who just deliberately always wants to do the right thing, and Dorian, who is a bit more gray. We haven't really seen that in CR3 or Campaign 3, but definitely was there in EXU. But just their power, their friendship, and that power of their honesty and transparency with one another, I think is really great.
Yeah.
Which if Dorian dies, that would be two important people that Orem has seen die.
Yeah.
It's be interesting to see how that goes.
Oof.
So,
Oof.
you ready for a segue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk JH. Gina Hexam? Is that right? Janai?
Gianna, I think.
Janai. Gianna Hexam. Which by the way, the interpretation I got of the bid was my interpretation, or the bet was it was Ashton's crew that she was referencing, that burglary that she was being teased about from her colleagues,
You
rather
think
than
that was
just
the
some.
same one?
I think so, because I mean, it could not be. It could be that JH that they I already forgot Gianna
Gianna, yeah.
that Gianna Hexam's was just conveniently burglarized a couple of times. But the line that Matt delivered was something like, when I was burglarized, as you're well aware of, or something like that.
Mm.
This bet has sort of arisen from my colleagues saying like, well, our defenses are so much better than yours. So that's my interpretation of like where that the backstory there, by
Yeah.
the way. Go ahead.
I've had this same thought, but the reason I didn't think that it was the same one, which I thought it was kind of weird that why is she getting robbed all the time? um, was that wouldn't that have been a while, like a long time ago? Because didn't Ashton like run with that crew years ago? And so why would like a recent wager come up about a robbery that was years past?
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. I didn't really put the timeline together because we know Ashton's also, we know he's been in Dressar for a long time, for a while, longer than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So you may be right. It could be that this is just a yet another recent burglary, and like the over the years being burglarized has caused her to be sort of like the brunt end of teasing and whatever from her colleagues.
Yeah.
That does make a little bit more sense, I think, for sure.
Which I don't know that it's been years though. I just for some reason I thought that like been years since he ran with that old crew and they all left. I had the impression that was like years ago, but maybe it was 2 weeks ago for all we know.
Which would be interesting because it would mean, yeah, his new form is also pretty new.
Yeah, and it would also mean that they haven't worked together that long. Ashton and
Yeah.
Gianna,
It
which
would
but it
also
seems like they
mean
have a
that
history.
no, I'm just kidding.
But also,
That's the last one I got. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it would seem like they haven't worked together for a long time. Which did he give Gianna uh the platinum, by the way?
I don't think so, because I remember that
Okay.
Ashton was going there to. He mentioned
Yeah.
that, but I don't think that actually happened. But
Yeah,
anyway,
okay.
I think I cut you off because I said the thing about that I didn't think it was the same robbery. But were you going somewhere? Like we were talking about the wager, the
No, no,
gambit.
you didn't. I was actually asking you like, hey, do you think that was the case or not?
Oh, okay.
Um it is interesting how their relationship is so transparent.
Yeah, I
Even
liked I liked that.
yeah, even Imogen being like, "Can we trust this person?" He's like, "Oh yeah, totally."
Yeah, because I was wondering that
Um,
same thing. I was like, whoa, you're telling him about Vali, like, because that's probably going to get that word about that incident's going to get around, and just like, is she
yeah.
not going to turn y'all in for that?
Uh, because I'm like really writing this theory of doomed Lord Esteros. This could be their next like the backup
Yeah.
noble character who sort of like isn't as giving as Lord Esteros as like the crutch, but also can sort of like help them continue to stay involved in Dressar.
Hmm.
Um, and it seems like this quest in the Heartmoor is either something that could happen many episodes from now, like when they're fully done with Dressar, or, I think you mentioned even on our last video that maybe the events with Volley is going to create a lot of heat and they have to get out of town even in the next couple episodes.
Yeah.
This could be like the next angle for them. Which I want to ask you, since you've seen the first two campaigns, how common does the party ever get like side missions and quests that they ultimately don't pursue? Like, is Matt just giving them options, or do they typically always like follow through with these things?
Um, Both. I mean, there's definitely things that don't get pursued, just which I think is kind of like just like real life, honestly. Like, not everything you encounter is going to be something you pursue.
Mhm.
So, um, I would say there's definitely things like that that are just left, and I don't think this would be one of them though, especially with the connection to Dorian's brother. I think they will end up doing this no matter what, but on a grand scale, I would say that these types of things don't always get pursued.
Yeah, okay. And then geography, location of the Heartmoor compared to Dressar. Okay, that's what I was thinking too. Was like I have no concept of
Yeah,
location here.
I'm
Other,
terrible at directions
and
in real life. I'm
yeah,
even
yeah.
worse in
Well,
Exandria.
and Gianna even said like it's not quite right outside of town. I mean, this would be a trip.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you also, does the party in previous campaigns, do they typically fast travel, or like would
Um,
it like could next episode could they say, yeah, we're going to take this mission, and then in the same episode be there, or is the party a bit more, yeah, for the next 10 episodes we're traveling to the Heartmoor and here's all the hijinks that happen on the way, or is it another both situation?
um, Both in the sense that the parties usually fast travel when they're higher leveled and have like spells that can teleport them, or they have means. So like earlier, like until they have that, but sorry, I'm going off on different things here. Until they have that, it'll be the slower travel, but it's not like it's going to take 15 episodes to get to somewhere far away. It might take a couple, but um Matt like won't draw out dullness just for the sake of like
Mhm.
being accurate
Okay.
for, oh, this is across the continent, so it's going to take us at
Uh,
least 7 in
yeah.
episodes of travel to do it. But no, like if they have horses, then if all they have is horses, then that's what it's going to take, and it'll take them a couple weeks or however long it is. But then we could have the situation where Estros is like, hey, I'll let you use my airship, and so they could get there, fast travel that way. um
Yeah, good point.
but yeah, the long and the short of my answer to your question was both. They usually progress on a
Yeah, okay.
linear scale as they get more powerful with how fast they are traveling. Um,
Yeah.
but on Gianna, again, really quick, I love their dynamic with the trust, and I just am really interested in learning more about that dynamic. I have some assumptions, but really they're just that some guesses rather. because we really don't know enough. But it's interesting to me that she, Gianna obviously like, even though he talks about how she's mean but honest, like she's not like a warm, caring person seemingly. I think she does have a soft spot for Ashton, because could have just turned them into the authorities back in the day, but
Right.
instead gave him the chance to work off this debt and has maintained this relationship with him where they are both completely open to each other, which seems like a dangerous thing to do, especially for like a noble. I wonder if like she kind of views him as like a herself when she was younger, or maybe like a surrogate child situation. Um, I
Yeah,
don't know. I'm very interested in
I'd
what's
have to
going
see
on there.
more between them. It's there's a couple things that are interesting to me. One, Ashton did a couple things. He went out of his way to protect her identity.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't even let Imogen know who the letter was
Right.
from.
Right.
Um, Feigned ignorance to Lord Esteros about the initials JH when he easily could have been like, yeah, it's this person. So didn't even want Lord Esteros, who presumably has gained significant trust of the whole group. Um, but on the same token, it now I back off from that of like this familial relationship to it being it could even be just ideal driven. Like he's mentioned a few times. I don't, I think when Lord Esros first said, "Hey, don't tell people you're working for me," he was like, "Yeah, like of course, like that is the right way
Mm-hmm.
to do it."
Right.
And then to JH even said like, "Hey, I don't talk about my clients."
Mm-hmm.
So it could be ideals driven. I don't quite sense the relationship there yet in the sense of like how you described it. I see it more of and this is a bit more cliche or typical, the noble who wants to utilize someone of shady means
Mm.
to advance and solidify their own power. I see it a bit more self-serving.
That makes sense.
And also the way I drew on that too was whenever Ashton mentioned Volley, it was totally like a good gossip session. Like what's happening there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm eager to see more of the interactions to see what that relationship is like.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, can we assume that Gianna is the one who like blew off half his body?
Yeah, I'm wondering about that too, because he just like felt a burst of magic hit him in the back or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe she has security, somebody that like wealthy and high to
Yeah,
do, or maybe it was literally her and she's a spellcaster of some kind. Which, if it was her, that could also be playing into the fact of why, maybe some part of her feels like guilty about,
sure. Yeah,
which,
seeing what happened to him.
yeah, especially
Yeah,
because he's not a kid, but it would have been young, especially when that happened, right? So maybe she felt, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Okay. All right.
Um,
So I was going to segue. Do you?
I got one more thing, and I know
Yeah.
I'm probably waxing too poetic on this, but I had another thought, at least from Ashton's point of view, so not really Gianna's, but from Ashton's point of view, she kind of is like the most stable thing in his life,
Right.
because after that incident, his whole crew left town, abandoned him, and we don't know exactly when that was, but since then, Gianna's probably been the most constant thing
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, and it's definitely why I'm interested to see the relationship continue to develop. And when I say segue, I don't even really have anything to segue to. I'm just kind of getting the lay of the land of where we are after 10 episodes deep in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like, and we did this with EXU kind of teasingly, but the sort of like the plot threads, like where do we go from here? Like where does the story potentially go? And I think in terms of like major points, I think we have Ira, uh, Ira Gurge, and I might even loop in Broomstone with that. Maybe that's unfair to do that. Maybe it should be its own separate thing. The Heartmore, um, Treshy House, and the Anger are
Mm-hmm.
sort of the big four of, they could all be related in some way. Well, the Heartmore's obviously not. Um, but we could in the next few episodes see the group be going down an entire story arc in one of these four ways.
Yeah.
Uh, not really quite sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to find out more about any of them. Like you mentioned, the Heartmoor is kind of its own
It's like a
side
side
quest,
quest.
if you
Yeah.
will. But
Yeah.
like it's like Ocean's 11 is how I
Yeah. Yeah. It
thought
could be
about it.
cool.
It's like two rival gangs of thieves trying to steal something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm actually really excited for that, but obviously would be really happy if one of those other paths were taken because that's what we've kind of been building up to at least thus far.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, do you have anything else you want to share on tonight's episode?
Let me just take a really quick gander at the old notes, but I think we hit basically everything I wanted to touch on. Um, I'm assuming you have pretty much hit everything you wanted to.
Oh, I did want to mention one last comment that I
Hmm.
read. It was just posted 3 hours ago. This came from Vested Lemon. Uh, I got the same impression that Ira has been responsible for, or at least connected to all the weirdness that's been going on. Also, the Nightmare King is definitely the leader of the Ivory Syndicate, right? Which that's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I think I said the same thing. I think I responded to that, but yeah, where have they been? You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
are they part of
Yeah,
this whole Ira thing? So
yeah, that's
that
an interesting thought. I have nothing to say about it other than just like, ooh,
yeah,
interesting. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, did you see anything else in your notes, by
Oh
the
yeah,
way?
there is one thing that I even wanted to say
Okay.
last week, but it happened again this week. The freaking set, man, with the rain,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
So cool. And I wanted to say that, so I had to make sure.
yeah.
But
That's very cool.
super jealous of that.
Yeah. Yeah, the old D&D session my house is a bit lower a
Lower
bit lower
production
set
value.
design. Yeah, yeah. So, as I set up two fold out tables with a sheet.
Classic.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, for you guys who are watching, definitely tell us what you thought about the episode down in the episode description below. Don't forget, you can check out if you prefer to listen to our deep dives, you can check out the podcast, just the Pixelist podcast. It's on Spotify. We'll be on iTunes, hopefully in the near future. And other than that, you can follow us at the Pixelists. Will, I think we need to do our thumbnail.
That's right. We could just do our best Ira, whatever you want to do for that. Just,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
creepazoid.
yeah, yeah. Hang on.
All right. Also, I tried to mute every time, but I was coughing a lot this episode, so my apologies if any of those coughs came through.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, yeah. All right. Yeah. All right.
Nice. I like the blue orb.
Yeah. You'd think it'd be an awesome D&D design item, but it's an ornament that my kid pulled the top off of. So,
Hey, improvise, adapt, overcome.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. Well, that's it. See
We
ya.
will see you guys next week.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.